attendees to show up, and then I'll start babbling. Okay, I think we've got a pretty good balance of the public here, so I'll begin. All right, well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon. Welcome to the October 14th, 2020 BAR Large virtual meeting. My name is Jay White. I'm the acting chair. The other board members present this afternoon are James Metters, Leon Scott, and Luda Subchuk. City staff that are present are Lawrence Courtney and Alex Howell. As is our typical, the order of our meeting will be tonight as follows. We'll begin with an introduction and brief overview of the project by city staff, followed by a applicant presentation. These are typically 10 minutes. If you believe that you need more than 10 minutes, then please alert me at the outset of your presentation so we can time you accordingly. After that presentation, the applicant will field any questions by the board or staff. Now, any and all presenters that speak during this period need to clearly state your name for the record, and that anyone affiliated with the project, such as owners, developers, designers, consultants, should speak during this portion rather than during the portion reserved for public comment. After that phase is done, we'll enter into public comment, which is a commensurate period of time. During that period of time, the applicant does not respond to comments made during the public comment. And again, for members of the public who may wish to speak, please clearly state your name for the record. This will be followed by a city staff comment and recommendation, and that followed by a 5-minute time for an applicant response or clarification to either public comment or city staff comments and recommendations. That will be followed by a board discussion and a vote. If the applicant wishes to speak at any point during this period in order to clarify incorrect information that the board is wrestling with, then please ask to be recognized by the chair. None of our items tonight have been withdrawn. Doesn't really seem like it's necessary to say so via Zoom, but please turn off all cell phones and other devices. Keep your pets in the adjacent room, and please limit your comments to architecture only. Comments related to zoning, such as parking, traffic, lot coverage, or livability concerns are not in our purview, and we can't take action upon those here. All right, with that, Mr. Courtney, would you like me to run through our virtual board meeting processes?
If you would please, Mr. White.
Yeah, sure. All right, so on the screen before you is information for how to participate in the virtual board meeting. By virtue of you being here, it's perfunctory for me to read this, but do note that public comment is limited to those people who have already made contact with the city beforehand. There's really no vehicle in the Zoom webinar format to introduce new speakers other than those who had already taken the steps per the agenda to sign up to speak. Okay, next slide, please. All right, so our protocol during these remote meetings, these virtual meetings, staff is controlling the slideshow. That this includes anything that was submitted by the applicant by the deadline. Anyone that speaks, applicants, staff, or board members, please give your name whenever speaking. That greatly aids the recording that's being done. The video and microphone has been disabled for all attendees. Attendees who have scheduled to speak will be given the capabilities to speak when they're called on during the public comment period. The chat and Q&A functions have been disabled for attendees. And then during public comment, the applicants and all team members and the public have been required to register, indicate which project they wish to comment on, and submit any documents in advance of the meeting. Just as it would be in an in-person meeting, all applications heard today are part of the public meeting format. If you've registered and will speak during the public comment portion of the meeting, you will need to state your name and address for the record. Those members of the public that have registered will be called on in order by project. Members of the public that speak are encouraged to remain in the meeting for the completion of the item that they've commented on. And then staff will call on the registered members of the public to speak for each project. And registered members of the public who raise their hand will not be called on. All right, next slide.
Oh, yeah, I did.
So board members will be polled by the chair for comments and for their vote on a motion. Each member when voting, please respond uniformly, stating either yay in favor or nay not in favor. The chairman will reread the motion verbatim, and the board member making the motion should correct the chair if he has not reread the motion accurately. If a board member needs to recuse, that board member will be temporarily removed from the meeting and placed back in the meeting at the start of the next agenda item. If the board needs to go into executive session, they'll call on a separate conference line, and all video and audio for Zoom will be temporarily turned off until they're ready to return to the regular meeting. Staff will issue meeting results, including staff comments and board motion, to the applicant following the meeting. Results will also be posted on the city website. All right, and just as a reminder again, these proceedings are being recorded. All right, with that, Mr. Courtney will proceed.
Hey, do y'all hear some background talking or something?
Yeah.
Yes.
I guess there's someone who's talking in the background without having their system muted.
Yeah, well, I'm sorry. I'm in an open office plan, and that's just ambient background sound. But
Some of those wily city employees.
yes, we're a little bit out of sorts down here these days. Excuse us for that, but I think it's
Thanks, Lawrence. Okay.
resolved now. As Mr. White indicated, I am Lawrence Courtney. I am the staff architect in the planning department with the city. I'd like to thank everyone for being here this afternoon. I'd like to especially thank all the board members for their hard work and efforts on the board. Item number 1 on the agenda is 48 Smith Street. This is a request for approval for demolition of two story residences on the south side of the property, 1-story garage on the east side of the property, associated carports and shed, and 1-story rear addition of an existing dependency. This is a category 3 structure in Halston Village, circa pre-1944 and post-1955 in the old and historic district. Some site context photos. You see the site marked in red here. Smith Street is just to the west of that. Wentworth on the south, Montague on the north. This is looking directly at the old historic main residence. This is looking at it at the side and front of it. A view looking south on Smith Street. Looking north on Smith Street. The 1902 Sanborn map, which just shows the main house and dependencies. The 1951 Sanborn, which shows the addition of some ancillary structures on the site that we'll see later on as well. And with that, we will turn it over to the applicant for their presentation.
Hear me? Hello?
Fairly.
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm sorry. We had a little glitch there.
Okay.
Hi, members of the board. I'm Bill Huey, the architect representing this application. First, Alex, or excuse me, Alex. I'm used to asking for Alex to do this. Lawrence, or Alex, maybe you're doing it. Can you refer to our sheet plat? I believe it's in our application. There it is. Thank you. Members of the board, as you'll note, this is a large property. It's basically 0.59 acres, and it's currently consists of a series of connected historic structures on the north side of the property, and two more recent, relatively recent, two-story residential structures on the south side of the property, and an open carport structure to the rear. Okay, Alex, are you flipping or is Lawrence? I want to make sure.
It is me, Bill.
Lawrence, can you go to sheet A001?
Well,
Back. There we go. Oh.
Excuse me.
Yes. Oh.
All right.
Or maybe the Sanborns. There it is. Oh.
There you go.
Great.
Sorry.
Thank you. The Sanborn maps indicate that sometime before 1944, the building to the south side of the property at the rear was established as a two-story duplex with a metal roof and one-story porches. The existing building at Smith Street that we're talking about is post 1951, as you can see from these sandboards, and we believe by nature of its construction, those were probably constructed somewhere in the 1960s or maybe even 70s. Also, we want to note that just very quickly, while we're looking at Sanborns, this will be for a later discussion, but you can note that the main structure there is noted as apartments, and that would be the building, the proper main building of the property. And if you can now make a jump. I'm sorry, Alex. Lawrence, to get you jumping around, but if you can jump to sheet A004. Okay. This is the front building, which we know is post 1951, according to the Sanborns. Again, we believe probably in the earliest would probably 60s vintage construction. You'll note that the materials however, are really kind of common to both buildings we're going to look at. So the front building, indicative of this age, actually has many similar material elements that show up on the second building. We think we know the reason why that's happening. So this sheet shows the front building construction, which is CMU and brick veneer, common lap siding, and modern windows with applied shutters. The roof is a coated membrane type roof. It's hard to see that on these photographs. The interiors in this building are sheetrock with a basic trim package inside. Okay, Lawrence, sheet A005.
My
There we go. Thank you.
my advancer is just not working.
Perfect. Got it. Let's see. So this sheet shows the older second building, which appears to have been modified pretty extensively. The porch columns, the trim, and the railings are all modern materials. The roof is a 5V crimp metal with extensive patchwork and damage to it. The interiors have been extensively renovated with sheetrock, simple and modern trim, modern kitchens, tile cabinet or countertops, things like that. And just a side note, the current property owner, not our client in this interest, but the current property owner has also stated to our client that he has self-performed a lot of work on these buildings over the last 20 years, which we found to be pretty evident. There's a lot of going on there. And you can see in the upper right-hand photo and in the center photos, there are also the two single bay independent carports that flank this building that are of non-historic construction as well. both with modern materials and even some salvaged parts. As you can see here, there's a column that looks like it was repurposed with, you can see where the handrail actually engaged the column. That was probably pulled from somewhere either on site or somewhere down the street. We don't know. Okay, Lawrence, sheet A006, please. Okay, here I want to make reference. Sorry.
And just not able to get this thing to work right.
Okay.
It's just
Jumping all over.
it really is. This is amazing. Okay, almost had it there.
So actually this, I believe is, yeah, we need to go back.
That's an
We're into the other presentation now.
Yep.
We want to jump back.
My apologies, everyone.
There we go.
Oh, it was there.
It was there, yeah.
It was there. Okay, everybody has my word that this problem will be resolved the next time we meet. I'm not quite sure what's causing this. Really don't know. And I can't seem to advance it. Just one slide at a time.
And it's not critical, Lawrence, if you can't get to it, because I believe most of the board members visited and saw it. I was making reference mainly to A006 as a photo sheet that shows,
there it is.
There we go, the modern open air carport to the rear of the property. And then the bottom row of photos show also some other items that we're talking about for demolition. They're shown are some non-historic steps and a deck at the northwest corner of the property that access the north side of the main fire damaged home. All of this is treated pine material, obviously of modern construction, and did not show up on the Sanborn maps. Also, the last two photos of this sheet show the non-historic one-story addition garage that bay that it's at the northeast corner of the property at the rear of the carriage house. That's CMU construction with a failing membrane roof. It also did not show up on the Sanborn maps that we had of record. Basically, that's a summary of the items we're asking for demolition, and we hope for your support of this request. It's important, obviously, as a segue to the next portion of the presentation we want to bring forward, but we appreciate your review of this application and would entertain any questions you might have. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from the board or from staff?
So Bill, this is James. The stairs that are shown in the bottom left that you were talking about with treated lumber and not shown on the Sanborn map, is the masonry column old or new?
It appears to be old brick, James, but I believe it was probably constructed using salvage brick. So it's old material, but I think it's a new pier. If that makes sense.
Okay, and then switching gears to Lawrence, I don't remember the sheet number, but going back to the older buildings on the south side. Yeah, that's good. So, you know, when I looked at this with you, maybe a month ago, you could see the obvious materials that were, had been replaced and maybe replaced the second time and replaced the third time even, and then maintenance. But your best guess is that this is a 1944 or earlier primary structure.
Yeah, there's a big lapse between 02 and 44, and it does show up somewhere in between. We had a written history of the property, which actually does show up if we want to go back very quickly to, I believe it would be sheet. Let's try A001 again. I'm sorry, Lawrence. No, yeah. Yep, look, the sandboard. Yeah, that's it. So we do have this written summary, James, that HCF provided to us. And it's kind of a nice clue of potentially the development progression on the property. And it does make mention to this gentleman, Dr. Josiah E. Smith in 1935, who was responsible for renovating the house, carriage house, servants house, and adding a new frame structure to the rear of the building, converting the property into 8 apartments. And that, I believe, took place probably mid-century at some point. We don't quite know when. He kind of took the house in 35. So I believe that I'm just putting together sort of an assumption that in the division of the property into apartments, he may have built this ancillary structure over here. Again, potentially maybe it would have been after 35, I believe, but up to 51 when it showed up on the Sanborns.
Okay.
That's the best evidence of a window that I have. And
So
again,
that-
I'm making a bit of an assumption.
Yeah, sure. The framing of the house, the guts. Have you looked at it? Have you done any like sheetrock removal or interior to actually look at what the framing is?
Yeah, we haven't done extensive yet. Obviously, the owner's starting to open up to us being able to do some of that exploratory demolition and other work. But my owner has stated to me that any and all salvageable materials will be salvaged in any demolition. So if there's any framing members or anything like that that are older sawn lumber, if you will, or anything of appearance of historic merit, that will be salvaged and repurposed. That is our intent. And that would go for any other items that might be salvageable. The real investigation is going to be what's new, what's old. This thing has been sort of redone a number of times.
Well, Bill, I guess what I'm looking for is just for you to give me your thoughts on, you've got a structure there from 1944 and the veneers on it aren't there, right? So yeah, I got that. We looked at that and we talked about a lot of specifics when we were down there. Mm-hmm. But the structure is 1944. And as I recall, you go through and the floors are kind of all over the place. Mm-hmm. But I mean, certainly the structure could be salvaged. I mean, it's got an age of, 70 or 75 years old. And the reason for not doing it is just too much work. I realize the elements, the beautiful parts are all gone. Are we just saying that there's just not a lot of value to the framed elements, or it's just not worth saving those frames? Just what are your thoughts on that? I mean, obviously I'm looking at the plan, so I know it's that we're going to tear it down. But
sure. And to that point, James, I would say that as you addressed, as we saw on site, the building has been basically refaced, if you will, probably a number of times. Most of what we're seeing now, as far as the exterior skin of the building, is more typical of what that front building is presenting. I believe at that time, probably a renovation occurred to that building to more or less make it match or be congruous with the front building. So I believe most of the exterior is of a much more contemporary nature. Obviously, we can see from the 5B crimp roof, and the modern porch is totally modern. That's even more recent than the 70s, I would surmise. I believe it's gone through probably a couple of renovations since then. And at the same time, I believe the interior was gutted pretty much wholesale. Most of the finishes we've been finding are sheetrock, modern trim, one-piece nondescript moldings, everything right out of a book. I haven't found anything that really indicates that there's anything of, super valuable historic merit there it's been compromised to a degree that I believe it's pretty much downgraded into at least the same realm of contemplation of the front building. I believe it's pretty much to that point.
So the real question that I have, which you and I talked briefly about a few weeks ago, is just the value that you put to that historic framing that's there.
Right.
Because I agree with everything that you're saying about all of the veneers, wherever they are. And it's just it's the value you put to the structure, even though the structure may need maintenance. That's really what the question is here.
Right.
Well, I think actually not to unduly cut anybody off, but rather than get into an extended dialogue here, I think that's probably a question that's better posed to the board once we enter board discussion. But
Yeah, well, Jay,
I'd like to move on. I'd like to move on to public comment, unless there are any other questions from the board.
No, Jay, it was important to me to hear his comments about the reason.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Any other board questions or questions from staff?
No.
Well, hearing none, let's move on to public comment. I don't know, Alex, I don't believe we had any public comments specific to this application, did we?
No public comment specific to the demo application.
Okay. How about the staff comments and recommendation?
Well, staff notes that the one historic structure on the south has been through several renovations, and that the exterior historic building fabric remaining is quite ordinary and likely of much more recent vintage. And while staff is reluctant to lose any historic building fabric anywhere in the city, and while demolition should be viewed separately from any proposed development, in this case, it is hard to ignore the greater good promised by the restoration, reconstruction of the historic main house, the renovation of its dependencies, and the promise of a sensitive and compatible addition of new structures. If demolition is approved for the historic south residential structure, any reusable historic fabric should be salvaged where possible and reused elsewhere. While it is noted on drawings and understood to be part of this work, the demolition of the stair up to an added entry on the northwest corner of the historic main house is not mentioned in the request, and technically should be added by the applicant by reference prior to board deliberation. With that, staff recommends approval of demolitions with board and staff comments noted.
Okay. Any board discussion or a motion?
Yeah, Jay, I would like to, again, just acknowledge that, again, I'm not sure if there is an engineering study that has been done on this structure. Maybe it has, maybe it hadn't. And just for the record, I'm supporting the demolition of these two structures. So there's not an issue with that. I'll make the recommendation for it. But when we're talking about historic materials, it's more than the veneers. You know, it's the structures also. And what I had hoped that we would get was, because we don't know what the new addition's going to be. We don't know what it's going to look like. We don't know about its sensitivity. I'm sure it's going to be great. We don't know about its compatibility, but I'm sure it's going to be great. But so it would be nice to have a a significant structural evaluation saying, listen, this is what the condition of these things are, just to feel the best that we can feel about demolition. And having said that, if there are no other board comments, I'd be happy to make a motion to approve the demolition request.
Well, I'm not hearing any, so fire away.
Please.
Make a motion for approval of the demolition on 4648 Smith Street as applied for by the applicant with comments by staff and board included.
Okay, so that sounds like a motion for approval of demolition with staff and board comments. Do we have a second?
I'll second it. This is Leon Scott.
Okay, so made and seconded. Ms. Subcheck, how do you vote?
I'm sorry, I was muted. Yay, in favor.
Okay, thank you. All right, Mr. Scott.
Yay, in favor.
Okay, Mr. Metters.
Yay, in favor.
And the chair votes likewise. The motion carries 4-0.
Thank you.
All right, and moving on, agenda item number 2. At the same location is a request for conceptual approval for stabilization and restoration of the existing main house, renovation of rear dependencies, and new construction of residential buildings. Again, this is a Category 3 structure in Charleston Village, circa pre-1902 in the Old and Historic District. Site context photos, I think, should be about the same as they were the first time, and there's only one. So with that, we'll move on to applicant's presentation.
Thank you, Lawrence. Mr. Chairman, this is a multifaceted and sort of complicated project, so I might formally request a time extension if possible.
By how many seconds do you need?
Well, I think I could ask for 5 minutes, and I tried to write this out to be as quick as I can. It's really a 2-part presentation, and also I would say we have some other members who have signed in on behalf of our project team who would be able to elaborate on further questions I believe the board might have. So there may be an extension that the board could.
Let's just shoot for 20 minutes, shall we?
Okay, thank you. So I would, first of all, Lawrence, make a reference to sheet A003 of this presentation.
Lawrence, I think if you zoom out a little more.
Okay, now we'll see if this is working.
And again, there it was. And again, it's the sandboard sheet. I just wanted to go back to that real quick. And you, as I believe, and we can talk through this while you're there. It is, Lawrence. As we talked about at the previous application, as indicated on the listed narrative provided by Historic Charleston Foundation, the house dates from the early to mid 1800s. The property was divided into apartments in the mid 1900s with a total of 8 units. So I just wanted to point that out again from this sheet. Lawrence, sheet A004. This sheet shows the intended master plan. Please note that the roof lines indicated for some of the buildings have been refined since this plan was put together, but the intent is still valid as depicted. The project was reviewed also by zoning for its south side and rear east side setback variance, which was given, the variance was given on August the 4th. I wanted to bring that up. And we also attended a TRC sketch plan Wednesday meeting on July the 1st to get some initial feedback as well, which we appreciated and got some good feedback from them. All the required parking is handled on site via both surface parking and garages, which is a requirement of 17 spaces. And wanted to point that out in this master plan design. Also, the plan maintains a formal garden, which is viewed from the historic piazza, and private gardens for several of the units, and preservation of the large 30-inch pecan tree on the property. The only adjustment required will be a reconfiguration of the front driveway access and fence to accommodate a minor shift in the drive location. We've done that to accomplish a more direct axial ingress into and egress out of and into the property. Okay, that's the master plan. Then I would like to also just note on this, we do have a landscape architect that we have enlisted. This plan will be elaborated on. This is the best an architect could put together. I will now refer to the section of the packet called labeled Building 4 Stabilization. Thank you. This actually is a series of 5 sheets of drawings. And for purposes of the discussion, Building 4 is a fire damaged historic main house. The sheets included in this section are for stabilization and deconstruction engineering plans from Russell Rosen. I know there may be specific questions about this information, and our general contractor, Mark Regobuto, and his associate, Michelle Chichester from Renew Urban, they'll be acting as our in-house preservation superintendent. Michelle will be our preservation superintendent. They're on this call to answer any questions about process, cataloging, and procedure that you might have. I just can't cover all that right now for the sake of time, but I'll defer to them during the question period of presentation should you have questions about this part of the application, which I know is important to you. Okay, now I want to refer to the section of the packet labeled Historic Buildings 4 through 6. And our sheet A4101, there it is, through A4202. These are the existing condition drawings that we were able to produce via field measurements earlier this year. Just want to make a statement. This building, as we all know, is in very precarious condition. And we were fortunate to be able to measure and document when we did. The middle section of the house had another internal collapse a few weeks ago, and we would not have been able to get the access to get these measurements, but for we got to it before it happened. So it's still precarious right now. I wanted to make that as a statement. The other historic buildings, 5 and 6 on the property, which you can further the slides through. These would be the subsequent historic buildings behind the burned building. They're in good condition, and we look forward to a much simpler, straightforward restoration of these structures. And in comparison, it's a cakewalk compared to what we have to do with the front building, as you may understand. And a final point about the front building, again, we're referencing Building 4. We are requesting to raise this main building approximately 3 feet in height. Our client has legitimate concerns about the rising water situation that we're all seeing in the city. And most important, raising the building, we will be able to restore the main house back to a single unit, single family unit. And we would be able to provide an apartment in then the ground floor level, which historically was just a basement. So the main premise of restoration of the interior of that main building is sort of paramount to what we're trying to do here. And I do have one more point about this house and one final point. Research into the original configuration of the main house in its restored state is ongoing. Obviously, we had very limited access to the points of the house we could get to, but what we were able to discern was that the main stair was apparently removed at some point when the house was divided, probably when the house was divided into apartments in the mid 1900s. We look forward to working with our preservation groups and to research precedent homes in the area of that era for a proper solution to this and any other issues of reclamation of the proper form of the historic structure. Right now, that's the reason it's not depicted, because we did have that degree of limited access, but we have consulted with both the Preservation Society and Historic Charleston, who are very amenable to working with us to help us with that research, make sure that our reclamation efforts of that main stair, which is the main heart of the house, are properly done. Now I'm going to refer to sheet A007, please. And it's probably going to be a little ways through. It'll be into the newer section, if you will, of what we're trying to do. A little further down in the packet.
A007?
Yeah. It'd be up, sorry, it'd be up at the beginning. I'm sorry, I'm going to do a little jumping here, Lawrence.
Okay.
It's the, it's going to be depicting the streetscape elevation of the new buildings. Now, I just want to touch on this because I'm going to turn this over here in a second to Freddie Heck, but I did want to point out from this sheet, we were asked to provide a streetscape study, and what we wanted to do in this depiction, especially the top drawing here, was to show how the proposed height of our new building, which is depicted there at 46 Smith, relates to our raised historic structure and also the adjacent structures on the streetscape. And just to reiterate, once again, we received a zoning approval for development of the master plan. But with this streetscape elevation, we're showing our intent of subordinating the proposed building fronting Smith Street on the south side of the property in both height and width to the main building 4 once it's raised. And a summary of our philosophy of height, scale, and mass and general architectural direction, which is what we're here today to discuss regarding these new buildings. Collectively, our team we've made a concerted effort to address the new buildings as historic properties warrant, which is a descending hierarchy of height, scale, hyphenation of masses, and a progressive simplification of detail from front to back of the property. And I did want to go to the very final slide. I'm sorry to get you to jump that far, Lawrence, but it'd be maybe not the exact last, but maybe the next to last. We had a couple of renderings that we had done. And I'm going to turn this now over to Freddie Heck, who would like to speak about the proposed new buildings for the property. I will say we've been working together for several months with the neighbors, the neighborhood association, and the preservation groups. And the work has culminated in this presentation to you. And we appreciate that's the view right there. I just wanted to leave that with that. And Freddie, I'd like for you to be able to maybe chime in now to discuss the new buildings. And again, we'll be available to discuss any part of this at length per your questions. Thank you. And if you can enable Freddie, that'd be great.
There we go. Got it. Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Board of Architectural Review and city staff for this opportunity to present 4648 Smith Street. My name is Frederick Heck. Everybody calls me Freddie. My husband, Bill, and I are prospective purchasers of 48 Smith Street. We're a team who now call Charleston our primary residence and truly enjoys redevelopment of historic properties with a hands-on approach. As some of you may know, we have completed the total renovation of one of Charleston's more significant architectural treasures at 1 Meeting Street. For our collective backgrounds, Bill has had a distinguished career in real estate, developing some of the more significant commercial retail properties in the country, such as the World Trade Center site in New York City and Century City in LA, among many others. While it's difficult for me to promote myself, I've owned my own business my own design business for over 30 years and specialize in residential redevelopments of the highest quality around the country. We look forward to combining our experience in towns to rescue 48 Smith Street. With regard to this project, first and foremost, our main passion and therefore focus is the total restoration of the grand historic structure and dependencies. As Bill Huey mentioned, we are excited to convert the main house back to its original functionality as a primary residence. Our challenge to date, given the destruction caused by the fire, is the safe documentation of the historic fabric. Therefore, this will be an iterative process to document the design as we safely secure and stabilize the building. We look forward to more discovery and cooperation with preservation groups as we go. I know I also, my husband can't wait to roll up his sleeves and literally get his hands dirty to save as much of the historic fabric as he can. By way of example, you should know the main front doors at 1 Meeting Street, my husband refinished and shined up the hardware himself. He likes to do this more than play golf. Okay. Regarding the new structures, I spent a great deal of time with the key stakeholders, Dennis Dow, City Architect, Historic Charleston Foundation, Preservation Society, Neighborhood Association, adjacent neighbors, and direction from Bill Huey to refine the plans. The overall design inspiration for the new buildings is to pay respect to 48 Smith and the overall neighborhood and the overall neighborhood. I wanted to create buildings that stand on their own and speak a classic, timeless style with modern elements. Buildings 1, 2, and 3 will be outfitted using quality materials. They will be masonry structures with masonry stucco. The Hinsel stone windows will have deep returns with stone sills. The doors will also have stone surrounds. The buildings with metal roofs will be hand crimped. Building 2's roof will be a composite slate, which was recommended by the city architect. All of these new buildings will have integral parking. And then, Lawrence, can you please change to sheet A1-2005, and it's the ABCD north elevation? That's like A-1205. Right there. Yep, that's it. Perfect. Thank you. Building 1 consists of Unit A and Unit B. Unit A is a refined style and services Smith Street. Building 1 has the highest height of 42.5 inches of the new buildings. In collaboration with the various groups, we have made Unit B step down and back so the building is more subservient to the refined style of Unit A. There is a very pronounced hyphen between 1 and 2. The hyphen is a garage and a terrace garden for Unit B. Regarding Building 2, C and D, we are asking the Board of Architectural Review for an additional half-story relief for a garret. On this building, we have a gabled composite slate roof, which has a lower eave line to overall lower the height in Building 1. This building is 41 feet high and therefore progresses down from Building 1. In difference to the refined style of Building 1, we're not only trying to diminish the height, but also to simplify the style of both Buildings 2 and 3. And then if you could please go to sheet 3-201. Thanks, Lawrence. This is Building 3, Unit E and F, which is 39 feet high and therefore nicely progresses in height from the first 2 buildings. And again, the design style will follow the same simplification detail as Building 2. Thank you for allowing me and the team to present this project. We plan to expeditiously commence on the project in order to save the fire damaged building. I look forward to working with Lawrence at the city staff to further develop and present full materiality and landscape design. I open the board with any questions.
Okay, any questions from the board or staff? Well,
Yeah,
hearing none.
Jay,
Okay, go ahead.
so what is the flood zone for this property?
Bill, you might have to say that.
I think,
Bill Huey.
yeah, I think Bill
Bill
Huey.
Huey would have to answer that.
Yeah.
Bill Huey, can you jump in on that, please?
Yeah, if you can go to sheet, which sheet is it that has the flood zone data?
Thank you.
Okay, it does show up right here on the survey also. Yeah, we can go ahead and make reference to that.
So it's an X and AE13.
Yeah, I'm sorry, that's Nicole V from my office. It's both a FEMA flood zone X, but it's also a flood zone AE elevation 13. The majority of the property towards Smith Street is AE elevation 13. The X is only at the very rear of the property, which is the east side of the property. And it shows up on the plat. That would be Lawrence on the, is it the plat showed it, right? Our drawing labeled plat.
I tried to zoom in on it. I'm sure it's on there, but I just couldn't see it. I couldn't see it.
Yeah. Let's see, James. Hopefully we can. There.
But I mean, if that's what it is, that's fine. I mean, I don't need to see it. I get it.
There it is. You can see that sort of angular line back there. That's the X on the north side of that line and AE 13 to the south.
I had a question that was somewhat related to that. So the main house, building 4, is being elevated 3 feet or so. Is that to raise the ground floor above flood?
It's to do a couple of things. What we're trying to do is we're trying to provide mechanical service for both the ground floor unit, but also the main floor of the main unit without a major invasive ducting, rather than provided in the interstitial ceiling space or anything like that. We think by raising it up, we'll be able to service mechanically the entire ground floor of the main level of the house.
So you're basically raising it 3 feet so you can create a plenum between the ground floor and the main floor?
That, yes. And then that ground level living unit. We are proposing that. So it'll provide us the ability to do that mechanically, yes.
Okay.
Well, so Jay, that's where I was going with this. What will the elevation of your first floor be relative to grade outside? I mean, you're not putting the finished floor up 3 feet of your ground floor apartment.
You're speaking of the lowest level, James?
Yes.
Yes, the lowest level will still relate approximately at elevation 11.
So this really isn't about flooding on the first floor. It's just to, as Jay was talking about, just to accommodate chases for ductwork somewhere.
Yes, and we are also trying to be to whatever degree proactive. Although we are in an AE elevation 13, we have spoken with the neighbors, and Bishop Lawrence, immediately to the north of our property, has previously mentioned to us that he has some rising water issues in his ground level that actually apparently perk up through the slab. He doesn't know the exact source, but his research told him that there was an old riverbed somewhere in that area. And he's mentioned to us there's actually water that perks up through his slab and floods his ground floor.
So elevation 11 will be flooded. That's what you're saying?
It could
So,
be.
and you will have apartments there anyway. It's basically raising, it has nothing to do with the flooding. What you're doing seems to be with raising the 3 feet. It's accommodating to have the apartment there plus plenum for the HVAC.
Yeah, the main purpose is to provide plenty of space and clearance for that. That is correct. Again, all this in conjunction with trying to establish the main house as one unit without having to cut it up. There is obviously an issue of economics of the project, and we think to be less invasive to the main house is a positive. At least hope you see it the same way.
Okay, any other questions from board or staff? No, hearing none. We will move on to public comments. So I know we have a number of letters to read, but I guess we'll go through the in-person speakers first.
So we have 3 public speakers. We'll go first to Anna Catherine Carroll.
Anna Catherine Carroll with the Preservation Society of Charleston. The Preservation Society appreciates the applicant reaching out to us on the request, as we have been invested in the 48 Smith Street project for several years alongside the owner, the Charleston Village neighborhood, and the preservation community. From the beginning, saving the historic house has been our top priority. Through this process, it is critical to ensure that all salvageable historic material is reused to the greatest degree possible, and that exact reconstruction of the house is carefully executed based on available documentation. To achieve this goal, more detailed drawings guiding the process of stabilization are needed. The 5 stabilization drawing sheets lack specificity and do not adequately outline a comprehensive approach to a stabilization effort of this magnitude. While we understand the need to make this project feasible, we are conflicted by the aggressive infill program proposed for this residential property. Architecturally, the new buildings have improved through the design development process, but we feel there are still improvements that need to be made. We feel building 1 is most successful at a conceptual level, with building 2 and 3 representing the greatest challenge. Across the board, the visibility and design of the garage doors are of concern for us. Specifically, we feel double garage doors are a foreign suburban concept and should be broken up into smaller scaled openings. On building 2, the central projecting mass on the north elevation is an overpowering element and should be minimized as to not loom heavily from the rear of the property. And we also feel it would be important to allow a visual break between buildings 2 and 3. We also feel the fenestration needs to be restudied. The double paired windows on the north elevation would be more successful as 3 traditionally sized to minimize horizontality. We are also concerned with the fenestration on the south side that includes significantly scaled windows overlooking neighboring properties. Further, the connection between buildings 1 and 2 is problematic. The connecting garage should be minimized in height and footprint. The garage should not project outboard of building 2, but be inset between the buildings. For building 3, we generally feel the design direction should be restudied to be more appropriately detailed as a secondary building, rather than incorporating grand architectural references such as circular windows, a portico entryway, and paired windows and double garage doors, which will be highly visible down the driveway. With that, the Preservation Society is committed to ensuring the best possible outcome for the historic house at 48 Smith Street and is hopeful this proposal will achieve this goal. Thank you.
Next, we have Jim Lundy. And you should be able to unmute yourself and speak.
Okay, can you hear me? Mm-hmm. All right, I want to thank the Hex for meeting with, I'm speaking, by the way, I'm speaking on behalf of Charleston Village Neighborhood Association. We have met with the Hex once in person and then once by Zoom more recently. And it's always a pleasure to work with them. We're very concerned about 48 Smith ever since the fire and the city mandated stabilization plan was not implemented. So that is our primary concern with this property, our primary interest in this project. We want to know how the plan, which I understand to include saving only the west and the north facades and removing everything else before whatever's going to be rebuilt. And that differs quite considerably with Craig Bennett's plan, which saved interior structure on the property. So we want to know more about why that's necessary. We want to make sure that the stabilization is well underway before any new construction happens on the site. We don't want to see the 48 Smith further deteriorate while new buildings are being built. We have expressed our concern over the height and mass of the new proposed new construction since our very first meeting with the HECS. They've addressed some of our concerns, but we don't feel like we're nearly there yet. We look to the traditional format of the pattern you see with the main house and then the smaller subsidiary structures behind it, which doesn't seem to be reflected at all in this configuration. And building 3 has actually no historical precedence in this familiar pattern, which we see throughout Charleston Village and the old historic city. You don't see a building, a large building on the back center of a property. We'd also like to see the 3 buildings, if there is to be the 3rd building, further separated from each other so they don't look as one continuous building from the street, which I fear that they will. We're concerned that there's an overlap in building 2 and 3 where they sort of meet at the corner, leaving a green space for the occupants, but it makes the buildings look like they're connected. So just in summary, beyond height and scale, we believe that the general architectural direction warrants significant study and additional community conversation is needed, which we will be very happy to facilitate at Charleston Village Neighborhood Association. A lot of neighbors are affected by this, contiguous neighbors who will be looking at some of the walls, these facades of these buildings that don't seem to have any particular care of their design. So we want to make sure that the view of the building from everyone's property is satisfactory. And in light of everything that I've mentioned, we are very reticent in offering our support of this proposal as presented. Thank you.
And lastly, we have Justin Swebler. You should be able to unmute yourself and speak now.
So I'm Justin Schwebler, representing Historic Charleston Foundation. The owners and design team should be commended for their plan to rehabilitate the existing structures on this site. The foundation has worked diligently with the applicant to come to a reasonable plan since the fire damaged the existing structures in 2017. We see the ultimate goal being rehabilitation of the historic structures on this site, and we are comfortable with the plans to rehabilitate the existing buildings. There are, however, no proposed floor plans included on the most recent submittal that was provided to the foundation. From the first generation of drawings provided, we were concerned with the form and location of the main staircase, specifically the second floor landings. We are also concerned with the openings on the second floor piazza. Based on the proposed drawings, the south elevation, it's difficult to determine what the openings are based on the changes to existing. Is the central opening on the second floor a door or a new window system for a bathroom? We would also like to see a window returned to the 4th bay immediately to the right of the central opening and not a doorway as drawn on the elevation. Additionally, we find it difficult to interpret the structural stabilization drawings. We would prefer to see plans illustrating each level in its entirety within the house and the proposed stabilization measures at each floor as opposed to various sections of each floor plan. We are satisfied with the salvage plan details that were provided to the foundation, but would like to see those included in the submission to the BAR. At this point, the foundation is generally comfortable with the overall architectural direction of the new buildings on site. There are a few changes we want to see at the preliminary level, including the removal of the closed gable and ocular window over the 2-story bay windows on the north elevation of building 1. We recommend making the bay windows rise the full 3 stories and terminate in line with the cornice. In addition, we feel the applicant should revise the renderings and elevations included in the submittal in order to show an accurate depiction of building 1. The new 2-story bay windows have been left out of the elevation and renderings on pages A1.205 and A007. We also make note that the applicant should look to form a more robust landscaping plan selecting plantings that will provide denser layered screening to hide central parking lots, garages, and will give the residents more private areas from the street view. Normally, the foundation would not endorse a height, scale, and mass comparable new buildings. However, we are willing to support conceptual approval for this particular application in order to ensure the proper rehabilitation and reconstruction of the existing historic structures on the site. The applicant has expressed a desire and commitment to incorporate high-quality materials and craftsmanship in the execution of this project, and we look forward to the successful execution of the design team's plan. Again, we're confident that the applicant will deliver a high-quality final product, ultimately guaranteeing the preservation of the historic structures on this site for many years to come. We want to thank the applicants for their continued communication throughout the course of design review process, and we look forward to reviewing the high-quality materials, craftsmanship, and detailing at the preliminary level of this design review process. Thank you.
That is
Alex,
all the. That's all
so
the.
I got what you mean.
Sorry.
That's all right. Yeah, we have a number of letters to read into the record. One of them was submitted by Charleston Village Neighborhood Association, but having heard from their representative, I'll pass that one up. First, dear sirs, my bad, madam, we live adjacent to 48 Smith Street for the past 40 years and perhaps the property most affected by the proposed redevelopment. We have met with the Hex and their design and construction teams on several occasions. We've been impressed by their willingness to engage us with the process, and frankly ecstatic with what they have proposed in quality next to us and for the entire neighborhood. It also gives us great comfort that the Hex do share a deep passion for historic restoration, as they have shown in their efforts at number 1 Meeting Street. Harold and I do fear that we will lose the historical significance of the historic structures if action is not taken expeditiously. We wholeheartedly support the proposed project. Luann and Harold Pratt Thomas. All right. And I am paraphrasing these lightly just for time's sake. Dear sirs and madam, I have lived immediately across from 48 Smith for over 10 years and have a direct view every morning to the subject property, continuously watch the property fall in what can only be described as total neglect, even before the fire. I have been approached by the applicants, the Hex, and their team, and they have shared their proposed plans. It's good, very good, and I support it and them. Please do not hesitate to and expeditiously approve this application, since we cannot let this opportunity go by. Sincerely, Earl Carrara. Then, I am writing my letter of support for the proposed redevelopment of 48 Smith. My wife and I currently live next to the historic property that had a catastrophic fire over 3 years ago. We request that certainly be kept appraised as plans developed to stabilize the main building. We also ask that there be a definitive schedule to commence and complete stabilization of the damaged building. We do fear the large wall on our shared property line has been weakened further as a result of last week, and we are highly concerned about safety. With regards to the overall plans, we have been informed of the height and mass of the proposed buildings, and we're confident that the Hex, along with their team of architects and construction personnel, have the ability, probably more importantly, the desire to do the job properly. Sincerely, Bishop Mark Lawrence, 46 Smith. I think we have one more. In regards to item number 2, we are on one hand very pleased to see 48 Smith proceeding forward with a plan for reconstruction of the existing main structure. However, we have some issues with the new construction that is included in this proposal. Specifically, the proposed front building on the south side of the site is too massive. It will visually overwhelm the current structure at 48 Smith. We would ask that this proposal be deferred and ask the applicant to study options forward, focused towards smaller scale for the front structure. Best regards, David and Scotty Hoffman. Okay, that is all of the public comment, both verbal and written. Staff recommendation and comments.
Okay. All right. 46 48 Smith Street, stabilization, restoration, renovation, and new construction. Staff comments. Generally, the stabilization and future restoration, reconstruction of the historic residence and renovation of dependency structures at 48 Smith Street should be the focus of the project, with the new structures being differential to them. The new buildings should not be more elaborate than the historic buildings and should be stylistically compatible with them. Going forward, locations of items like mechanical units, service entries, meter locations, and screening should be increasingly better delineated. The additional half-story height on building 2 will need to be specifically approved by the board for architectural merit and context. I have broken each part down into its own section here after this, so if you will bear with me, I will run through them as expeditiously as I can. A master plan. The master plan is simple and well conceived, with a new drive and nicely screened surface parking being worked around an existing large pecan tree and new landscaping. It appears that good quality materials are proposed and specialty hardscaping and generous landscaping are present. Staff recommends conceptual approval of the master plan. Okay, B, building for stabilization. These stabilization plans are from a well-respected structural engineer who has done a lot of preservation-related work locally and is well known to both board and staff. Time is of the essence here in stabilizing this historic structure. So our recommendation is final approval as submitted. C, building 4, restoration, reconstruction. Staff applauds the very important work on this fire and weather damaged historic structure. All work of this conceptual level appears to be being done in accordance with the Secretary of the Interior standards. Therefore, our recommendation is for conceptual approval. D, building 5, renovation. It is noted that the shutters are more recent non-functional appliques that should be replaced with appropriately sized wood operational shutters with appropriate hardware. The roofing is largely a 5V crimp that should be replaced with an appropriate hand crimped standing seam roof. It is noted that electrical aerial drops and meters should be relocated off the primary facades. And I have learned that the applicants plan on relocating all electrical to underground. At least that is at this point their stated goal. Therefore, our recommendation is conceptual approval. Once again, this is for building 4. Conceptual approval with staff and board comments.
Excuse me, may I ask a question quickly? There's a
Yes.
lot of buildings here. Should we just look at each building separately and vote on it rather than go back and remember what was discussed on all of them? Jay, what do you think?
Well, we touched on that right before the meeting began, and this has been submitted as a single application. We have the we have the ability to vote on them separately. And I think what would come out of it would be a rather lengthy motion, but I think that we can probably, I think we can probably handle it with one motion. It'll just need to be specific to each component of the proposal.
Okay.
Okay, in that case, back to building 5 renovation. It is noted that the shutters, I think I've been through 5, haven't I?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. On to 6, renovation and new construction. Except for the new construction at the west, the exterior is not being altered. Electrical aerial drops and meters should be moved from the primary facade. Once more, the goal here is to relocate it underground. The applicant is maintaining at this point. The roofing is 5V crimped. It should be replaced with an appropriate hand crimped standing seam roof. The removal of the 1-story structure to the west with the replacement 2-story structure is very minimally visible, if at all, and is a nice addition. The detailing of this addition should be done in such a manner so as to differentiate it from the historic structure. The historic chimney should be left in place and repaired as necessary. This is alternately shown as remaining or missing on plans and elevations. So our recommendation is conceptual approval with staff and board comments noted. On to building 1, new construction. Let me see if I can't get this where I can read the whole thing at one time. I don't think that's going to be possible. So, the simpler and more straightforward massing of the first noted building with the hip roof and simplified main body shown on sheet A1-205 is preferred over the blocky mass of the proposed flat roof structure. The additional height of the 6 and 12 or reasonably sloped hip roof will not be overly apparent from street level and will not visually compete with the nearby historic structure. The roof needs to be an appropriate hand crimp standing seam roof, metal roof. The band between the 2nd and 3rd floors should be eliminated. The band at the 2nd floor level could be wider, and the water table should be more articulated and heavier, with the column forms at the front elevation resting on it rather than going all the way to grade. This would establish a clear base for the building, but this band should be eliminated or downsized at the 1-story garage. The 3rd floor floor-to-ceiling height should be lowered to 9 feet with shorter windows, setting up a hierarchy of window heights as the eye moves up the building. If this is what is being shown, concealed gutters are to be avoided for maintenance and durability reasons. All architects love concealed gutters, but they are generally a problem unless they're really well maintained. Traditional copper gutters and downspouts are preferred. The steps at the parapet at the top of the wall are extraneous and should be eliminated. On the south elevation, shuttered blind windows need to be eliminated, especially as there are no other shutters on the building. While blind windows are discouraged, they may be the best solution here to maintain what little rhythm of the fenestration there is. The stone surround at the north entry should be replaced with a more simple wood surround. So therefore, our recommendation is conceptual approval with staff and board comments. On to building 2, new construction. Although there is a parapeted or closed gable at the east end of building 6, it is visually minimized and is an exception on this site. The parapeted gable ends of this building should be replaced with simpler open gable forms to not compete visually with the adjacent historic structures. Gas lanterns should be eliminated so as not to confuse the new with the historic. The building will require specific approval for a half-story increase in height for architectural merit and context. With that said, staff's recommendation is for conceptual approval with staff and board comments. Building 3, new construction. Staff appreciates the lower height, which is more deferential to and compatible with adjacent historic buildings. The use of wall dormers to help in reducing height is an appropriate approach. Although there is a parapeted gable at the east end of building 6, it is visually minimized and is an exception on the site. The parapeted gable ends on this building should be replaced with simpler open gable forms to not compete visually with the adjacent historic structures. The circular windows on the primary facade base read more like modern affectations and should be simplified to rectangular or square forms more similar to the windows above them. Gas lanterns should be eliminated so as not to confuse the new with the historic. Staff recommendation is for conceptual approval with staff and board comments.
Okay. Any response or clarification from the applicant? Bill, you're muted.
Thank you, Jay. Mr. Chairman, just a statement to say if the board does require more information about the stabilization and deconstruction process, again, we do have our contractor and his historic specialist on board on Zoom if you'd like to hear more about that. And we do appreciate the involvement of all the preservation groups and neighborhood association. Look forward to continually working with them to refine the project. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, board discussion.
I'll start. No doubt this is a significant structure, significant site, and great credit must be given to the folks that are taking this project on and the professional teams that would be completing it. I am confident that this project will receive all approvals to move forward, but I need to have more information than I currently have before I'd be comfortable voting for conceptual approval. understanding more about the lifting of the primary structure by the 3 feet. I appreciated the drawings which showed the heights of the structure as compared to adjacent structures. But I'd like to know a little bit more about the actual vertical heights, not just lines, but height differences between the new constructions that face on the street and the adjacent structures to the south. I would like to have more information on from Russell on structural stabilization, how that's going to happen. Bill, your thoughts about what do you really think is going to be able to be salvaged?
I'm sorry, was that a question for the applicant?
No, it was just a statement. I would want to have more, when this comes back, I would want to have more information on the structural stabilization. And Bill even making that maybe a part of the presentation because it is so important, and not as part of this question and answer at the end. And then the new constructions that wrap around the side, south side and the west. Seems substantial to me. And I think my last comment is better understanding of Bill. I know that you said this was your shot at the landscape and landscape plan, but looking at that one more step farther forward. That's all of my comments, Jay.
I can be next. This is Luda Sobchuk. So again, really support this project. It's great that this property will be revitalized and the existing building will be remodeled, renovated. I guess I don't have any issues with raising this 3 feet for the existing building. It seems proportionally it does not impair that building. And nevertheless, I have reservations about the front building, new front building, 3-story up, flat roof, overpowering actually the existing building right now. Even so, it seems like on the streetscape, it seems to be lower, but the massing in proportions of it in comparison to the existing building is actually, building looks bigger, and I would think that 2.5-story with the story in the roof, like the building behind it, will be more appropriate here to support the existing building rather than overpower it. At the same time, it seems like all new buildings, they have many elaborate details, could be all simplified as stated in staff comments. And some windows need to be relooked. In my mind also, there's round windows, oval windows. I guess railing is maybe a little bit too elaborate. The entrances, the rusticated stone kind of looking entrances could be also simplified to the wood structures. All that, again, it seems like all the new buildings are a bit overpowering the existing renovation and upgrades. So I also concerned about giving conceptual approval for specifically for the new buildings at this time.
Thank you. Mr. Scott, any comments?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with staff recommendations for conceptual approval with staff and board. Really, I thought it was a good presentation. I'm comfortable with what I've heard.
Okay. I just thought of a question. I should have asked it a while back. Mr. Huey, what's your gut feel for the potential for the stabilization? How, what do you think the odds are of actually stabilizing what is left of this building?
Well, I appreciate that question. And again, to Mr. Metter's point, I know wanting to hear more about this, I did try to be efficient with the time of the presentation. That is a whole nother division of this process that, again, we are prepared to talk about if you want to hear it. I know it's getting later on for a one-item agenda here. But we do have a cataloging plan, a disassembly plan. Jay, candidly, this building is barely hanging on. And so we are into the realm now of more or less a disassembly and cataloging of several of the elements, but then a reclamation of those and reinstallation of those. And we are prepared to talk about that in depth if you guys would like to, take the time to hear that. We are prepared to discuss that with you. The main point of that I just wanted to say was we are having to deal with structurally what we can deal with. And candidly, I believe Mr. Bennett's plan was prepared at a time when this building was in a situation of unknown peril. We now have someone in our current clients available to basically mobilize a sequential disassembly and reconstruction all at one time. In deference to Mr. Bennett's plan, and I very well respect Mr. Bennett as well, his plan, I believe, was surmised to stabilize the house in some degree of indefinite amount of time. It was very involved, and it probably would have kept the house in situ of its whatever current state it was in for some years to come. It was a very involved shoring plan. Ours is a little different from that in the fact that we're planning to basically mobilize and activate the entire process all at once. So again, we do have Mr. Regobuto and Mrs. Chichester from his office prepared to discuss that cataloging and disassembly process if you guys want to hear that.
Well, I think the issue that we've often faced as a board is that we take action formally on those documents that are submitted to us by the deadline, and understanding that it's difficult to draw what you plan if you're going to be flying by the seat of your pants. I understand that, but we have to be very careful about acting basically just fully upon spoken word during the meeting. That said, I think Mr. Huey did answer my question really, and it's that when dealing with the main house, building 4, you're really talking about a reconstruction, because this project to me has number 4 Gadsden Street written all over it. If you all remember that building, was another fire damaged structure that sat for too long. Once the crew got in there to attempt a restoration of it, it was deemed to be unsafe, and it truly was, and we lost it as a result. I will say that I think that a reconstruction is fully appropriate, and this is a building that is valuable to this block of Smith Street. But one of the things that makes this property so valuable and so notable is not necessarily the architectural grandeur of the house, but really just this enormous property. It's a huge lot. It makes the house far more prominent than it might be if it were sitting on another block on a smaller lot. So I understand that it's difficult to document a stabilization and reconstruction strategy on a building like this when it is in such perilous condition. And apparently, I saw it a month ago, and apparently even more of it has collapsed since then, which that is concerning to me. And I know it's going to be a major investment to reconstruct this building. But I have to say that turning my attention to the new structures on the site, I have a lot of concerns about this ensemble of buildings. You know, none of these buildings, the site plan, nor any of the structures themselves really fit the pattern of historic Charleston. They completely disregard the very simple ABC pattern that you have if you have a row of single houses. And that's missing from this proposal entirely. Each of these buildings is much higher in style. All of these buildings are much higher in style than, in almost every respect, than the main house, which we're supposed to be subordinate to. You know, the formal complexity of these buildings, the materials that are proposed are all really quite foreign to Charleston. We don't see architecture of this form or style really anywhere in the city, and especially in a working class neighborhood like Carlson Village. You know, the new buildings are shorter, but they're really not subordinate in any fashion. And paradoxically, while the new square footage is intended to sort of amortize the cost of the reconstruction, the new square footage is going to be probably more expensive on a per square foot basis than the reconstructed building to the north. So I'm confused about the basis of this proposal. I think that in years' time, people will really think that it was a dreadful mistake to allow this ensemble of high style architecture on this block. And I do understand the perilous condition of the house, and I do believe it does need to be stabilized to protect life and property. But I don't think this proposal should go forward.
So again, this is Luda. Everything we just said, Jay, that's exactly what I think and feel about this development right now, what is proposed. It's, I mean, to preserve and save the original house is it's a great opportunity here, but developing rest of the property in such a manner that it's totally dissociated from the great existing house is seems to be wrong right now.
This is Leon Scott, and again, I saw it as again, the non-architect here, is I thought the house was in such irreparable condition. I did not think it was even possible to to stabilize it in a manner that would allow construction too. And again, not being familiar with it, I saw it in such poor condition that I didn't know if it was able to be stabilized. And if it is, great. But I just thought that it was far beyond that. So I guess I have a question. I mean, has this been done? Has this ever been done to this extent to a building in this such poor condition? Has anybody ever experienced anything like this before and actually had the reconstruction come back in a level that's acceptable and and appreciated by the community.
So
I have observed that. I have observed reconstruction efforts on this magnitude before. And a lot of what we tend to call preservation with bad off historic buildings in Charleston is truly reconstruction. Like you're doing it stick by stick. But the real importance is preserving the form. That's often goal number one with a building like this. But it can be done.
Okay.
And it's a much safer strategy than trying to save it wholesale, because this thing is dangerous right now, and and over a 3+ year period, it has gotten worse and worse. Craig's report was when the building was not in this shape.
That's right.
Gotcha. Okay.
So Leon, let me answer your question also.
Okay.
Yes, you can stabilize that structure and then reconstruct it. And Jay's comments, I'm not going to take the time to restate it, but they're correct. And that team that is working on that project is capable of doing it.
Okay.
There's not any question about that. But if you're ready for a motion, Jay, I'll make it.
Please.
Yes, I think that, and we probably ought to address the buildings in groups or individually, just to make sure that we're.
Well, Jay, I was going to make a motion though for deferral on the application with board comments.
Okay. If I might, just to discuss that even before it's seconded, there was one of the items that is here is the stabilization effort for building 4 of the main house. The staff was recommending final approval with no further review, and I think that alone is important. But I agree with you with all other aspects of this proposal that really we need far more information.
So Jay and Bill, just let me ask you this question directly. I'm under the impression, maybe falsely, because we just had a brief conversation, but I was under the impression that probably without getting conceptual approval on these other buildings, you may not advance any stabilization on the original building. Is that true?
James, I would probably maybe let Freddie address that.
Sure. Yeah. Okay. My bad. Yep.
Freddie, are you available to address that?
Hold on a second.
Yes.
I can do it. This is Bill Hecht. I want to thank everyone for their time and attention to the matter. With regard to the question that's been posed, would we stabilize a building that we don't own and that we don't have approvals to do the development? I think the answer is unfortunately no, for obvious reasons. I do want to clarify though one comment that was made. We have done preliminary estimates on what it's going to cost to stabilize a historic structure, and it can be done. It's a very expensive proposition to do. And I think one of the comments that was made that the cost to build new would be greater than the cost to stabilize and rebuild the old. And that's just not an accurate statement. It is far more expensive. And thus the reality of us taking a comprehensive approach to the overall development to the site. And yet efforts we've taken to date. So thank you.
Yeah, and thanks for that answer. But Jay, that's why I made the motion that I did, because
So your motion was, I'm sorry. In the interim, I forgot what you said.
Deferral of the project with board comments.
Deferral with board comments. All right, we have a motion on the table for deferral with board comments. Do we have a second?
I will second that. Yuda Sobchuk.
Okay. Motion made and seconded for deferral with board comments. Mr. Scott, how do you vote?
I'm going to vote nay, not in favor.
Okay. Ms. Sobchuk.
Yay, in favor.
Mr. Metters.
Yay, in favor.
And the chair votes with the yays, so the motion carries 3-1. Okay. Mr. Courtney, that's the end of the agenda, is it not?
Thank you.
Yes, yes, and thank you all for being here and for that spirited discussion. This is what makes the board work. Thank you.
All right.
Thank you.
Everyone have a good evening.
Thank you.
Have a good one. Take care, guys. Take care.
Bye.
Bye.